Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Deneva from the Canadian Urban Institute, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming you to CUI Victoria, an initiative undertaken in partnership with the Canadian Urban Institute, together with the City of Victoria and the Victoria Foundation. I'd like to start with acknowledging and respecting the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the City of Victoria stands, and the Songhees, the Squamish, and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. Through CUI Local, CUI is connecting with cities across Canada to gather interpretations, data assessments, priorities, bright spots, and stories from on-the-ground voices to help deepen our collective understanding of the interconnected issues facing urban Canada. Together with our partners on the ground, we're organizing a series of public and invitation-only meetings and activities to explore and learn about local issues and connect them nationally to strengthen the connective tissue within and across communities from coast to coast to coast. And for those of you who don't know, CUI is Canada's Urban Institute. We are the national platform that houses the best in Canadian city building, where policymakers, urban professionals, civic and business leaders, community activists, and academics can learn, share, and collaborate with one another. So today's session will be recorded and the chat will be saved. And if you need closed captioning, look to the bottom of your screen, or you can ask for help in the chat box. In today's session, we will be discussing healthy and just food systems. We know that there are deeply entrenched inequities in the food system related to poverty and systemic racism. COVID-19 has exposed social and economic injustices that have been baked into our normal way of doing things. At the heart of food security is equity and dignified food access for all. If we're really going to achieve food security and food justice, then we need to listen and take the lead from those affected by the predominant system. Linda has worked for decades on these issues and will be leading a conversation with 3 food leaders who are working at the intersections of race and equity to discuss some of the challenges and opportunities that they see in their work. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to your moderator, Linda Geggy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Geggy, and I'm really pleased to see all of the participation today. I'm situated as a white settler who lives and works as part of the Good Food Network in the unceded homelands of the Wasanich and Lekwungen-speaking peoples. I'm on a continual learning journey and so grateful for the opportunity today. And I invite all of you to lean into this conversation, showing much gratitude for the stories and wisdom that we're being offered. To begin the discussion on equity in the food system, it's important to address that the panelists here today are expressing their own experiences and thoughts and are not representatives of any one group or culture. They will be talking to their own experiences and visions working within the local food system. There are deeply entrenched inequities in the food system related to poverty and systemic racism, and we must particularly acknowledge the ongoing role of white supremacy and colonization, and the harm that it has on racialized and Indigenous people who have lived in relation to the land since time immemorial. We know that at the heart of food security and sovereignty is equity and dignified access for all. And so it's really important today to hear from some of the leaders in our community about their thoughts and visions around this, and know that there are responses underway. Today, the roundtable participants will speak to the question, what do you see that gives you the most hope in your work in relation to equity and food justice? It may be important to you to know why this question was settled on by the panelists and the organizers. We're not here to gloss over or ignore the persistent challenges around equity. We want to take an assets-based approach that is centering the stories and actions taken by the leaders in these communities. Without further preamble, I want to invite our panelists to tell you their stories. And so I'll let you know that today we're going to hear from Pulcherie Mbosi, Jumana Rishek, and Ariel Reyes Anton. And we're going to start with Pulcherie. And let me tell you just a little bit about this incredible leader in our community. She is the executive director and founder of the African Art and Cultural Community Contributor, Pulcherie was born in Cameroon, and from the time she immigrated to Canada in the mid-1980s, she has earned a strong reputation as a community leader and advocate of promoting and celebrating the rich and diverse culture of Africa and the Caribbean. Pulcherie's lifelong commitment as an ambassador of African and Caribbean culture continued when she moved to Victoria in 2010. The African Art and Cultural Community Contributor is a Black-led, Black-serving, Black-oriented organization whose mandate is to advance awareness and understanding of the richness and diversity of African culture and traditions through the promotion of a broad range of cultural, educational, and artistic activities, events, and programs. Since 2017, they have been advocating for the International Decade for People of African Descent. The vision that Pulcherie is working towards is that members of the African and Caribbean are an integral and valued part of Canada's diverse cultural fabric, a community that can prosper and contribute to Canadian society while promoting and preserving their rich culture, history, and traditions. And I am so pleased to introduce Pulcherie.
Wow. I'm impressed myself. Thank you for taking the time. And yeah, so I'm here in Victoria on the Lake Ngwen territory. That's why I speak French. So I'm very honored to be here and in this land. Like for a few years, I call home now because sometimes people they ask me, "Where are you coming home?" I say, "Where? Where?" They think like it's done. So yeah. So yeah. So do you have a question? So I have a question. I just have to go.
Sorry, the question that we were looking at today was to understand what is giving you hope and inspiring about your work in community.
Oh, hope. Everything we do, it's a lot of hope, and we also have a lot of hope, like about everything, because also our hope is to have people of African descent, like we want them to feel when they are where they are in Victoria. We are talking to Victoria to just call Victoria home the way I do now, and it's important because to be able to find everything if it's your home, you just want to be able to eat what you want, what you need and everything. So I think when we are talking about food security and food is part of our it's part of our inclusion. It's part of our inclusion because I don't get it like myself. Until now, I still have to order some stuff from Montreal or from, because if it's like every month I have like a grave or something like I cannot find. So that means it's not, I cannot call Victoria 100% home because I'm still missing some stuff that are relevant to my culture. So, yeah.
Well, Shuri, do you want to tell us a little bit about the La Teranga program that you had as a vision, and that in particular in response to COVID-19, that was an important food access piece for your community?
Yes, yeah, La Teranga. Oh. First of all, La Teranga means hospitality. So it's from Wolof language. So Wolof is the official language in Senegal. So they call La Teranga. La Teranga it means like how to. They say La Teranga, but the meaning is how to make someone welcome in your home. Like someone who comes to your home, you want that person to feel more welcome than anywhere else. So I don't know. So it's like Teranga. If you go to a Senegalese house, they're gonna leave you the room, the bed, and they cook for you. This is what La Teranga means. And we chose it for the food basket because we wanted to have we create something for our community where they can feel like welcome and everybody. No, I'm losing. I'm losing when I go to. I'm mixing up like history, culture, and things. So we just during the COVID pandemic and the confinement, we send like a short survey to our community to ask them what are they missing because everybody was just stuck at home, and most of the thing they were requesting was about food. Because here in Victoria, we had one African store, and when all the store, everybody was down and they were closed because a small store. So they were closed, and our people, they were just like, they could go buy meat everywhere. I feel like they were just missing one or two things in the diary. So when we received that survey back, it was just that we want fufu, we want plantain, we want yam. I was like, okay, how, even if I want to support you with food, I can have yam here, the shop is closed and things. So I committed and I said, okay, I'm gonna make sure like to support these people, to help them to feel comfy, you know. So I connect with my my colleague in Vancouver to see where we can, if it's possible to have stock here. And they say yes. And yeah, this is where the idea of started La Teranga came from. And say, okay, how to support our people. And we need money to do that. No money, COVID, nobody's working. I think so. With a group of three of us, we just came with a project, and then we received some support from Red Cross and Victoria Foundation to start doing La Teranga. And our goal was to support maybe 30 families a week. And we had like 100. We received funding to support like 100 families in 3 months. And when we send the application out, we received like over 300 families requests, and they were all like palm oil, yam things. So it was just challenging. I know I talked to Ariel. That time was like, what should we do? And yeah, so what we did is like once a month or every 2 months, we rent a van. We had to go to Vancouver. I even had to order some stuff from Montreal to support the community.
Thank you so much, Pulsari. It just goes to show how the relationships are so important between the different community leaders, and also that when COVID hit, there was a lot of uncertainty and how to deal with a very changing environment, and that it was really important to reach out to your community and find out what exactly it was that they were needing during this time to support them, and how your organization was able to respond. And so I'll just leave you with one last question. If there was something now going forward in your work that would assist your organization to be able to build on the strengths and solutions being put forward by your community, what kinds of things would you be looking for?
We are regarding food, is disponibility, right? So if we don't have anything like on site, we're gonna have to order it other side, and that means we need money. We're gonna need more money. And we are talking about saving the planet or everything. So every if I order a yam from, because yam even from Vancouver, no, we don't find it most of the time. They have to order it in Montreal or somewhere else. Even when we order them, they are from Africa because they are not grown here in Canada. I don't know. I never seen. So it's very specific. So we have some stuff like that we have to order, and I think what I have been talking with my colleague here is how we can at least start something here, so we can have some basic. Maybe it won't be yam, because yam we need a special soil, but everything is possible here. People, they go to the moon now, so maybe it's possible to do something. Yeah. So we just need our support. By the way, La Teranga, I'm still doing it once a month because we still have some family, they cannot get some stuff. So here at our office, we have palm oil, we have things that we cannot find, so people, they can come if they need it. And yeah, I can talk a lot because I do a lot of things, so it's difficult for me to focus on one thing.
No.
So
Well, we are so grateful for your contributions to the community and your words today. Love to hear more about your program, and I would like to now move us on to Jumana Rishek, and thanks so much for that, Bulshari. There may be time at the end to come back to some of that conversation, but we're gonna now introduce to the webinar Jumana Rishek. And Jumana is a second-generation refugee of occupied Palestine, born in Jordan, settling in Coast Salish lands, colonially known as Victoria, in 2012. Jumana began her journey in political science and conflict resolution, working on the ground through Palestinian and Syrian refugee camps and Habitat for Humanity in southern Jordan. She quickly began to recognize that land connection, food sovereignty, traditional medicine, and story were keys to belonging and justice for those who have experienced diaspora. A healer and educator by trade and an artist by passion, Jumana deeply believes and devotes herself to bridging social justice and community resilience with art, poetry, and film. Today, Jumana serves as the creative director of EA Collective Living in Liberation, an impact-centered docu-series and educational series, amplifying the stories of BIPOC food sovereignty leaders, the spirit of our connection to food and medicine, and providing educational resources to empower her community. And she is newly the Youth Employment Coordinator with the Victoria Community Food Hub Society, so working with me. So just really, we're so pleased. The heartbeat of her work moves to the knowledge that we belong to each other, and through land-based connection, fierce compassion, and collaborative solutions, we can move forward in a way that honors the wisdom of those who came before us and those who will follow us. I'm pleased to introduce Jumana.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much, Buchari, also for everything you said. I found myself laughing and getting really joyful because when you were talking about the fufu and the plantain, it reminded me of our culture as well, where whenever someone walks in your house, immediately tea is being poured, coffee is being poured. It's how we connect to each other. So thank you so much for sharing that. Do you want me to just launch into an introduction about myself, Linda?
Sure. And do I need to just remind you? I know Postry also wanted a reminder of the question today that we were asking for. And so the question is around, I've just got to find it here again. to look at what do you see that gives you the most hope in your work in relation to equity and food justice. But feel free to riff on that.
Yeah, thank you. I tend to riff, so no problem.
Okay.
But when you were first introducing the webinar, you were speaking about this concept of food sovereignty being rooted in the concept of equity and access to food for all peoples, and in a way that meets the needs of all communities. And as I was listening to that, my response or my deepening of it was also that it includes all of our human communities and our non-human communities. So for me, when I think about what gives me hope in the food sovereignty movement and the changes and the focusing on equity more recently, is that for me, we can't really talk about food security or food sovereignty without it being rooted solely in relationships, the relationships that exist between our communities, our cultures, our stories, our land, and each other, really. And so what gives me a lot of excitement is the capacity that exists for healing, learning, and reclamation that comes through food in the equity work that's being done right now. For me, I see that a lot as a second generation Palestinian refugee being here. I arrived here not as a settler, but looking for a homage and a place of safety and security in the world. And I found a lot of grace and homage in these lands, but it took me a while to really learn the stories of this land and how I came to be here. And food was a really huge vehicle through which I learned where I'd landed and who it was that I was relating to. So for me, in my personal sense of community, I see food and food systems change as a vehicle through which in all of our different communities, as we go through our reclamation processes and healing of our relationships, we also heal our relationships to each other. Because for me, when I look at it, it's not necessarily about one system in place. It's always about a hybrid of systems. So how do we create systems which meet the needs of everybody present in all communities and allow us to enjoy foods from our homelands while also strengthening food systems that exist already here and strengthening those relationships too. So what gives me hope is the relational healing capacity of equity in our food systems and the capacity to really learn about the histories of the lands that we live on and our own histories and to share them with each other. My time in Canada as an immigrant and a refugee, what always drew me towards the culture was the idea of multiculturalism. But as I got closer, I realized there's many kinds of multiculturalism. There's the type that has to do with assimilation, and there's the type that has to do with integration. And what I see happening in the food equity movement is more of an integration rather than an assimilation. So that gives me a lot of hope. And what gives me a lot of hope also is watching youth get more involved in these movements. Food is something that connects all of us. If you're alive, you eat. And so I think there's a lot of beauty and potential in watching as that shared purpose comes through. Because for me, when we're talking about food, we're talking about land, we're talking about ecological justice, we're talking about cultural justice, we're talking about traditional justice. And so I think that this is a place through which, a nexus through which we can heal a lot in our communities and our societies. And that's what gives me hope. And it's a funny hope, because I always was given this parable growing up, this idea that there's optimism, there's cynicism, and then there's workism, is what they used to call it. So optimism is looking at a situation and seeing only the opportunity. The cynicism is seeing only the hardships of it. And then there's this sweet spot where we can see what has hope and what has opportunity, and then where the challenges are. And so for me, the hope comes with that. When I see the potential for the healing in our communities, I see it both with opportunity and the challenges that it brings forward, and it excites me. It excites me to think that we're finally going to start having some of these difficult conversations that have been happening for a long time, and putting boots to the ground and making sure that they're actually showing up in the way that we relate to each other and the land that we live on. So I don't know if that's too philosophical and broad-banded of a hope, but it is what gives me hope. Yeah.
That's so, there's so much there, Jumana, that you've unpacked. And I wondered if you might tell, I think a lot of the people attending the webinar, there's some people from Victoria, but from much broader beyond, you heard about your work with Living in Liberation and as a docuseries, but also a way of honoring these community leaders. There's a number of community leaders that you have been working with and helping to tell the stories of their work and their relationship to food and their hopes for the future, and also about how you hope this way of using film and art and story to open the conversation and to support more learning and change. So would you tell us a little bit about that? I think the webinar participants would be very interested.
Of course, sure. So you kind of already described what we're doing with Living in Liberation, but Living in Liberation is an interesting project because last year for the Good Food Summit that we did with the CR Fair, we did a project called Food is Connection. It was a short film. And in that one, we really went in with an open, broad question of like, what does food connect you to? And it was incredible, just the scope and the depth of conversation that could come from this small place of sharing a meal and exploring what food relates and connects us to. And what it really came out from is that food connects us to culture, to justice, to the lands that we live on, to medicine, to a sense of belonging, to a sense of purpose, and a sense of grounding and binding to the world around us. So Living in Liberation is a project that is really aimed at not providing any, how would I say it, any centralized answer for what liberation, justice, and healing looks like in relationship to food and land, but rather opening up a conversation and asking a culture shaping question. And so what I mean by culture shaping questions is this idea was introduced to me about 2 years ago, this idea that there are questions that exist that have as many answers as there are members of a community or as there are people to experience it. And through understanding all of the experiences, we start to shape culture as it is, you know? And so the idea with Living in Liberation is creating a space where we're asking these culture shaping questions of what does land connect you to? How does food connect you to land? What does living in liberation and finding justice in your community, in your family, in your life experience look like? And really using these documentaries as a ground through which to both, yes, amplify and hear and honor the stories of food leaders in our communities that don't often get included in the dialogue about food security and food systems, as well as to invite the conversation to start of we're all talking about justice, we're all talking about liberation, and we're all talking about sovereignty, but what does that actually mean to each of us? And how do we find ways in which our pursuits for freedom and justice support and interlink into each other rather than compete with each other, right? So this idea that if I am not free, or if you are not free, I cannot be free. If I find justice and liberation in my community, but I know that my neighboring community is still suffering, we haven't really done our job properly. And it really is an invitation to also look at food and food systems as what they actually are, which we're also talking about land management. We're also talking about our ecology. We're also talking about our relationship to land and to the foodstuffs. One of the things that was said in one of the interviews in the first documentary, which by the way is going to be released next month, just in case anybody's wondering, but one of the things that was spoken about is one of our presenters, Jared, had said that in his language, which is Helquiknam, he's from the Cowichan tribes, there is no word for food. The word that they use for food is sachten. So it's this idea of that which you eat. So nothing that we eat is in and of itself defined by its role as food in our life, but rather it is all life that we share with, that we tend and we care for. And if we were to so choose to eat it, there you go, you have the option to eat it. And so just these really paradigm shifting ways of understanding our relationships. And then when we take all of that and we look back at it and we apply it onto, okay, so what is the impact? What are the movements and what are the actual organizations that we have? And how do these meanings and this culture shaping question and people's answers to it actually integrate into the work that we're doing? Are we simply replicating the same systems with different faces representing them? Or are we actually doing a deep dive and really creating equity in the relationships and the ways that we handle our food and everything that food connects us to, including our relationships to each other, right? And our relationships to the land. And so the first episode is exploring the relationship between food and land. And then the second episode is exploring the relationship between food and medicine and our relationship to the sacred in different communities. Because in my culture, for example, food is a really deep connection to sacred practices. It's a part of our rituals. It's a part of our ways of connecting and honoring each other. It's a part of our prayer. It's a part of our understanding our belonging in the world. So much bigger questions at play. And then the final episode is about the ways that food both reclaims and heals culture and justice, as well as obstructs culture and justice. And then the educational tutorials are kind of more invitations to people about learning different food systems with different food practices and different food stories, particularly centering the indigenous people of this land. Because for me, there's a lot of importance in cultural exchange and sharing of foods and different foodstuffs, while also understanding that the cultural foods of this land have not been given the same space to be shared and explored and cultivated, right? And so there's a great importance for me around that, particularly as a Palestinian. I know how important food practices and land tending and land rearing is to identity, culture, and reconciliation. I mean, we're not at the point yet of reconciliation, but here hopefully we are. So I think that it's really, really quite important that we have some of these conversations if we're going to be talking about food security and sovereignty. How do we be welcomed into this home and into this land in a way where we bring forward the gifts and the beauties of our cultures and our food systems, while also learning, receiving, and honoring the ones that exist here already. Yeah.
I am sure everybody is really excited to be able to see the new documentaries that are coming out, the docuseries that are coming out. And I am just going to encourage one of my colleagues from CR Fair to put in the chat information about how they can attend the Good Food Gathering. And we are so honored to be featuring Jumana's work with her colleagues and with the storytellers at the Good Food Gathering. So I'll open invitation to all of you there, and a shameless plug for the gathering coming up in November. But I just thank you so much, Jumana. It's just such a pleasure to work with you. And now I'm going to pass it over to your colleague, Ariel. Ariel and I have come to know each other over the last couple of years and done quite a bit of work together this past year. I'm just really getting to know my hermano and amigo better as we're digging into some of this work and doing some planning together. And let me tell you that Ariel is Cuban-born food justice advocate, a community connector of mixed ancestry, Haitian, Yoruba, French, and Bantu. He is also the co-founder of EA Creative, where he ensures the participation and contribution of newcomers and other underserved communities on reconnecting back to the land and waters we live on, with the intention of holding space for ecological restoration, where healing, mutual aid systems, reciprocity, and abundance are means of breaking through the path of human suffering. Ari, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we really look forward to hearing what you have to say today.
You repeat the question, please?
I can do that. I know it's, what do you see that gives you the most hope in your work in relation to equity and food justice?
So first of all, thank you, my colleagues, Pulcheri and Jumana. I love you all. It is so beautiful what you guys have been sharing here. And as you speak, I was thinking, reflecting, even in my own experience as an immigrant, as a father, as a friend, and what gives me hope is we are having those conversations, those difficult conversations that, yes, they are uncomfortable, but they are needed in order to heal. Because I'm a fighter, and when I came with the fire and with the air, I said, we are living time of healing. We are living time of where we have to listen what people have to talk about their experience, what is the trauma they have gone through. And as I was reflecting, I've been getting educated every day more about the histories of the indigenous people of this land, the Lekwungen, with the with the Squamish and the Songhees Nation, and in general the Coast Salish people, and learning more about that journey. And as I've been learning and unlearning a lot of things that you bring as an immigrant, because when you are an immigrant, the first thing you want to do is be assimilated by the mainstream culture. I was like reading about the Truth and Reconciliation, and I was like, oh, I can't keep doing that, because I was fighting for land ownership, for Black people and immigrants. But I've been through the years like a switching, even with Juman, and this is a conversation that we all the time are having. And I've been like a transitioning into land stewardship, because indigenous people have been tending this land sometimes immemorials, and it is not like a right that we come here to take on something. It was built, on the suffering of indigenous people. So as a new immigrant, I hope that these like circles of conversations, we keep having like a changing ideas, but also how can we be accountable to what we say. So in the work we do, that's something that is it's a must for us. And how that healing process, as Humana was explaining, and even Pucheri was saying, it is about the way we connect with the land and water we live on, and understanding that our bodies are an extension of those lands and waters. And if we harm those ecosystems, we are damaging ourselves. And that's something that is being connecting to my Yoruba culture and even to my Bantu culture. And we have a saying in Ubuntu philosophy, it's like Ubuntu and Ubuntu and Gabantu. I am because you are. And until we aren't free, we are not free at all. So our freedom is linked to the way we relate one another, and to the way we relate to the land. And today that we're talking about food systems, my hope is like to answer the question that Pucheri was saying, how, for example, people from the African diaspora, including myself, like Afro-Latinx people, like the people from North Africa, and like Arabic people, how can we introduce new crops without harming the ecosystem that indigenous people have been fighting for? And also, how can we start eating more culturally? And it is still a question without an answer. I think it's gonna take us many lifetimes. And that's why I just took off the weight from my shoulders, knowing that what are we doing today is just planting a seed that maybe the future generations, they can take on that work, and we can one day sit at the table all together and like brothers and sisters, and that we can keep sharing, because life, it is about sharing. Life is relational, but the issue today is that we are living in a very transactional society where we still do not understand the gift of life. So that's my hope. We are at the table, we are having those conversations, but then we need to design what's next. And we are not in a rush. So that's our generation, is a generation of opening those spaces for healing, listening, and taking actions, and being accountable to what we say. And something, just to close that part, is I still myself have an issue when we call leaders, and even I don't identify myself as a leader. I identify I'm a messenger. What I bring to my community and to the people, the different community I engage with, it is about a message of liberation, but liberation needs work, and also that work have to be rooted in justice, have to be rooted in equity, and have to be rooted in dignity. So that's my hope. So
I just want to encourage people to put some questions in the chat if they have any for the panelists. But Ari, I'm wondering if you want to tell us a little bit about what it is that your work is centering on over this next period. You've been doing a lot of thinking and touching into your communities, and if you wanted to provide a little bit of information to the participants about what it is that you're working on.
So at IJ Creative is a collective of people trying to highlight the contributions and participation of different racialized communities within our local food systems. But one of the things that we have been is a challenge is how can we empower our people in order to participate more within the food system that is not only eating, it is about even from the seeds, and we are talking about seed sovereignty until we prepare for the winter. We don't do that anymore, but how can we go back in order to eat local? And how can we utilize the spaces that we have in our urban environment in order to grow food instead of having grass? But then the challenge that we have been facing at IJ, it is about the spaces. And when I talk about spaces, it's a space where we can come together to cook. And as Humana said, how can we decolonize medicine that we don't have to go to the grocery store, right? We can go to the kitchen, because I remember the kitchen is where the grandmas, they spend the most time. And we start healing ourselves and healing the relations that we have with each other. And as we're doing that, we are trying to create a market development. Is how can we introduce new crops? For example, Pucheri was talking about fufu, how can we do cassava? But for that, we need to different, it's an interdisciplinary. The community by itself cannot solve all the issues, because we have a grassroots movement that we are at the grassroots movement, but also we have the different levels of government. So it's we need to create a dialogue between grassroots movement, between the community, and also the different levels of government. And we need to consult more, because even for me, I have an idea about what the community should be doing, but we need to consult the community about what they really want to see within the local food system, and also empowering them to understand food systems, because not many people are educated. And that's why regarding food system, and that's why CRFAIR, many indigenous sovereignty initiatives, they have been explaining what that means to be involved within the food system. That is not only food security, where food insecurity is just a symptom of a bigger issue that was created by that colonial capitalism, and how it's been displacing us from our traditional cultural system. As Bocheri was explaining, how they have to import from Africa, from the Caribbean, at the expense of those people that are working for almost free, because I'm coming from Cuba, and we export cigar that we have that in Cook Street. But basically, going back to the point, at IJ, we are rooted now in relationship. We are building relationships. We are just consulting the community, consulting people that are already working in food-related systems, like farmers, local farmers, food processors, to understand how can we really be a support instead of creating another issue. So that's the work we're doing. And now we are doing a community-based research where we are conducting a study, and we are outreaching to community members to understand what is the impact that food insecurity have been creating in their households, because something that we lack in Victoria is data. There is not enough data to really conduct different community interventions like efficiently. And that's something that we are working on. It's a community consultation. Basically, that's what we're doing today. So we can plan the work for next year, and like the movie we are working on. And I think Puchali wants to talk about something.
Go ahead, Pulsri.
I wanted to finish first. Now, because Ariel just named something, cassava. So like a cassava is it's something like it traveled cross countries, cross generation from the first people who came from Africa. So even if we explore like a cassava growing, because it's possible to grow it here, I think we can check. Just for that, every single person from African descent, wherever, Brazil, wherever, we all eat cassava in a different way. We eat cassava from root, we have roots and we transform, and then we have leaves. And we have some countries in Africa or like in Haiti, they don't eat cassava leaves, but they just eat roots. So we can just an example of something that maybe you can do some research, like to see how we can start with it. I just want to add that.
Jemana, if you want to go ahead.
This is a different topic than cassava research, but I was just noticing in the chat that somebody was kind of speaking about their interest in food security for the disabled, and different folks talking about the unhoused populations and these other faces of food security. And I found it really interesting, and I wanted to bring it into the conversation if everyone else wanted to contribute too. But I think a big part of it for me is it brought up something that I've been learning a lot through the documentary. And I have to give credit here to Jared Hudson-Williams, because he introduced me into an articulation of this principle that I think is really relevant. And so I wanted to share that for me, when I'm thinking about or contemplating changes in equity when it comes to food security, it's important to think of food in all of the stages of food as it exists. I mean, I love what Putri and Ariel are talking about here in terms of like the growth of the food, the seeds of the food, where are they coming from? How is it being prepared? So in my mind, when we're talking about food sovereignty and food security, we're not just talking about the ability to access raw materials of food, but it starts at, does everyone have access towards being able to contribute to the process of learning the skills and being able to grow food within their local environments, right? Like so many of us, and this was something that really came up both in research and conversations with Ariel and in conversations with the community. One of the biggest issues that stands between people's connection to the land and their food sovereignty and security is a lack of access to land in which food can be grown, and into food growing environments where people are welcome regardless of their multiple barriers to access, like location, like transport, like disability, depending on the extent of the disability and the physical mobility. But it doesn't just stop there. It also goes to, once you access the food, do we have spaces for cooking the food, for sharing the cultural knowledge that is necessary towards understanding food, both as medicine and the preparation of distribution of food, and then the eating of food and the spaces in which food can be shared amongst people. And there's lowered barriers towards being able to access community-centered processes of eating food together and accessing food together. I kind of see all of these stages and processes of what food actually is. And Jared calls this the 6 stages of eating, right? Because eating begins way before you put any food in front of somebody. It begins at the process of understanding where that food came from and how it was acquired, how it was cooked, how it was shared, and then so on and so forth. So I kind of just wanted to speak a little bit to what these folks are bringing in, because I think we're all talking about our big hopes and dreams. And I just wanted to like zoom in and say that for me, when we're talking about food sovereignty, security, and equity, it includes all the stages of food, including the preparation and the access to it. And I'm sure Ariel, and I'm not sure, maybe you too, Pucheri, have something to say about that component of like the different stages and how we bring all of these principles into all of the varieties. And a big thing that's come up for me as well in the work that I've been doing is understanding and expanding our definition of food and food production and food systems. One of the conversations that came up a lot in the documentary that we were doing was understanding that different communities have different food systems that coexist with each other but are not acknowledged as such. One of the conversations we were having with folks from the Cowichan tribes is that untouched, unprotected, wild crown land, which we understand as being just this free-for-all land, is actually indigenous land where a lot of people from the tribes actually access their primary food source through wild harvesting, right? And so expanding our definition of like, what is a food system? What food systems already exist for different communities? And what are we doing in terms of equity, justice, and accessibility at each stage of food, as Jared put it, right? From seed to meal, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jumana, for expanding the conversation in that direction. I think the focus of today's session was on inequities in terms of racialized inequity. However, we know, and then when we talk about the 6 stages of food, that there are multiple barriers and things that together we must solve through, as Ariel pointed out, engagement, through creating and working on agency and empowerment. In my mind, the work of the Good Food Network is really to try and create conditions where people can thrive. And so that's about how they're connected to their own health and well-being, to their communities and to the land. And those would be really central topics today. And I really loved how we landed on this really important saying that it's attributed to Leela Watson, but she attributes it to a collective belief around, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And I think that's really the central message that I heard today coming from all of the panelists, is that this has got to be an effort that happens at the government level, at the academic level, at the foundations and the investors in these solutions and community movements, and right at the community level with the voices, and also addressing that the food movement up until now in North America has the visible food movement, and the one that's received a lot of the funding and recognition around this work has been the white settler community. So that dynamic is something we absolutely have to address and change. And working together as a Good Food Network, we're really trying to do that. And I think, Ari, I see your hand up, so I don't want to ignore you. I just want to be conscious of time. We have about a minute left, so I'm going to leave the last word with you. But I just want to take the opportunity to thank the Victoria Foundation, the City of Victoria, and the CUI for their support for this session. And in particular, of course, for Pulsheri, Ariel, and Jumana for their contributions today. I know there's a couple of minutes left. If anyone wants to put anything into it's called a chatter fall. If you want to put any one word expressions in there, just in terms of how you're leaving today, what you're feeling, what you learned, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll have a couple minutes to look at those. But Ariel, I'm going to turn it over to you for the last word.
I just wanted to add, of what Jumana was talking about, and even Pulsheri, and also community solutions that need to be talked more. And I want also to answer what Ruth Rogers, she is asking in the chat, just briefly. And we as a community, we as a society, until we understand the harm that food aid have done in our communities, and we understand a food aid, all these food rescue programs, all these things that we have been, even it's not that the food rescue program aren't important, but the issue for me is we are still perpetuating that international agricultural business instead of where they are being subsidized and we need to start like my hope also is like start subsidizing the farmers, because we have enough food to feed us all, but the issue is what we have been talking about, that in the food chain management, like those like small details that they are bigger at the bigger picture. It's like if we don't address the international agricultural business, we will talking about the same in the next 20 years. And if we don't pay attention to what the farmers need in order to grow fresh, culturally relevant food that is like a energy dense, and then the way we give back to the land, like that's something that for me, it is important. I just wanted to add that, and to answer to Ruth, if I can do it. Am I allowed to answer to Ruth? Linda?
Sorry, briefly, we only have a couple minutes left.
So I know that the CRFL is being like doing this work with the people with hidden disabilities, and even with disabilities, and even at EJ, all are welcome. And even we have people facing severe disabilities that they are able to participate in our programs. I think it's about more, it is about the engagement process of like how can we integrate like a people facing visual and hidden disabilities into the process. I think that's a takeaway. And yeah, it's like we don't discriminate. Everyone is welcome. We are all coming from different way of knowing and being, and we all have like at least one piece of thing that we can add, and we can engage within the whole system. And I just gonna finish, so I'm gonna pass it on to Linda. I want to thank my colleague. I'm always learning. That's why I love these spaces. I'm always learning. Thank you, Pucheri. Thank you, Jumana Ache. And thank you, Linda, and the people from the Canadian Urban Institute for putting this on. And thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Pucheri, Ariel, Jumana, and Linda for this vital conversation. We hope this conversation will encourage deeper interrogation and dialogue. There's a link in the chat where you can reflect further and answer the following questions. What's one thing you learned that you didn't know before coming here? What's one practical action you can take based on this new knowledge? And what are the next steps that could be taken in response to this conversation, and who should take them? We have a couple more sessions happening today that we hope you'll join. Coming up at 5 p.m. is a youth-only session for those aged 16 to 29, which will be an opportunity to reflect on the content of CUI Victoria from a youth perspective. Our goal in this session is to develop calls to action that different groups can take to respond to issues of concern and interest to youth. And after that, at 7 p.m. Pacific time, we encourage you to join us for Belonging in Victoria, Muslim Voices for Change, where Muslim women from the community will explore themes of Islamophobia, belonging, racism, and safety. This group will share their local and global everyday experiences and offer concrete recommendations for meaningful action on addressing ongoing faith-based hate, racism, colonialism on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples. Our team will drop the registration links for these two sessions in the chat, and you can also access them as well as the rest of the CUI Victoria session by visiting our website. Thank you again to all, and we hope to see you again soon.